Brothers, you were told the world belonged to those in power. But every promise was forged to chain your spirit. Tonight, I'll hand you the keys they stole, the truths they buried, and a mission that will burn within your soul. To reclaim your freedom, expose the puppeteers, and transform your life into the legend they never saw coming. Are you ready to fight for the man you were born to be? Listen closely. What you're about to hear was buried for centuries, locked behind iron gates in forgotten archives, and censored by powers that thrive on your silence. The candle's flame wavers as I lean forward, voice low and commanding. You stand at the threshold of a truth so forbidden, it will shatter the illusions you cling to. In the next few minutes, we will unravel a web of hidden agendas and ancient corruption, secrets layered beneath the surface of history, where rituals of power were forged in blood and shadow. You may think you know the real story of civilization's rise, but that narrative was meticulously crafted by unseen architects. Architects who bent reality to their will through psychological control systems and manipulations so subtle your mind never questioned them. Imagine an order of hidden custodians, relic hunters who trafficked in artifacts of menace and used them to warp societies. They whispered into the ears of kings, tampered with sacred texts, and rewrote genealogies so their clandestine bloodlines could govern generations. In every empire, from the marble altars of antiquity to the stained windows of medieval cathedrals, planted symbols, hieroglyphs of power that triggered compliance in the subconscious, conditioning masses to obey unseen masters. Their rule survived beyond collapse and conquest. After Rome fell, they retreated into monasteries, then into secret societies whose robed ceremonies still echo in the vaulted chambers of today's institutions. All around you, courts of law, grand universities, corporate boardrooms. Their fingerprints remain invisible but omnipresent, guiding the currents of wealth and influence. You think your freedom is real. You think your choices are yours. But every click, every vote, every whisper you share online is monitored, cataloged, weaponized. Those who claim to serve justice pull strings from behind the scenes, controlling narratives, suppressing dissent, and turning truth into propaganda. They peddle fear in daily headlines, weaving a tapestry of panic that keeps you docile and distracted. Yet the darkest weapon they possess is the erasure of memory, the systematic destruction of archives, the reclassification of history as myth, the execution of scholars who dared to speak unwelcome truths. When those voices disappear, whole chapters vanish from the record, leaving empty pages filled only by their version of events. Tonight, I extend my hand to guide you through corridors of forbidden knowledge. We begin with the earliest conspiracies, buried under the ashes of forgotten libraries. I will expose the councils that orchestrated the subjugation of empires, the blood rites performed at midnight, the psychological frameworks designed to break spirits. This path is not for the faint of heart, for once you peer into the void, it will peer back into you, forever altering the man you thought yourself to be. Brace yourself. You are about to descend into the hidden machinery of power. The journey has begun. In the smoldering ruins of an empire lost, a cable gathered beneath a blood-red moon, cloaked in shadows and carrying obelisks carved with symbols older than written language. Their leader, known only as the Silent Architect, traced those runes with a bone, white finger, reciting a litany so old it rattled the air itself. A whisper of dominion that seeped into the earth and altered the minds of every witness. They called it the invocation of the first veil, a psychological ritual designed to strip away free will and bind the soul to a single directive, absolute obedience to the hidden hierarchy. As the final syllable died, the ground trembled, and each member felt a surge of clarity. They no longer questioned orders. They became the orders. These custodians of power then dispersed across the world, sowing seeds of control wherever civilization dared to flourish. In Alexandria, they poisoned the scrolls of scholars. In Rome, they supplanted senators with puppets. In distant China, they infiltrated the forbidden city with spies reciting mantra, like pledges to an unseen emperor. Through centuries, they adapted, shifting from swords and spears to ink and coin, from open conquests to covert manipulations. By the Renaissance, they financed secret workshops, funding art that hid their icons in plain sight. The compass rose on a map, the triangular window in a cathedral, the serpentine coil in a royal crest, each a beacon to those initiated and a bind to those unknowing. Their greatest triumph arrived with the Enlightenment, when they orchestrated salons in Paris and London, whispering of liberty while engineering legal codes that enshrined their own privileges. They published treatises on reason and democracy, only to codify loopholes that protected their bloodlines from taxation, prosecution, and accountability. Meanwhile, they established psychological laboratories, prisons disguised as asylums, where they experimented on the human mind, calibrating fear and desire like an alchemist with lead and gold. Pavlov's bell, Freud's couch, Skinner's box, each was a fragment of the original invocation, repurposed to condition entire populations into predictable patterns of consumption and compliance. And now, in the age of information, they wield algorithms instead of scrolls. Your digital footprint is their manuscript, your anxieties and aspirations, their palette. Every notification is tuned to fracture your attention, to prime you for suggestions you believe you choose yourself. With each scroll, they refine their models, mapping your psyche so thoroughly that you collapse into categories. Profiles, segments, targets. You may sense a flicker of unease when an ad aligns too precisely with your unspoken fears, or when a newsfeed buries every dissenting voice. Yet most dismiss it as coincidence. The architect smiles, knowing the veil is thicker than ever. You are deeper in their web, and the descent has only just begun. The walls of the world you trust are built on erasure. In hidden archives beneath government vaults, entire dossiers vanish, files marked top secret, then destroyed by order, then simply untraceable. Imagine a historian uncovering a reference to a name, only to find every mention scrubbed. No newspapers, no letters, no photographs. That's how they craft consensus reality. When inconvenient facts emerge, massacres carried out in the name of progress, experiments on unwitting populations, hacks with criminal syndicates, they swiftly reclassify them as myths or false rumors. Truth becomes a virus to contain, not a foundation to build upon. And so our collective memory fractures, each generation wandering through a labyrinth with missing walls. They employ institutional puppets, professors, journalists, archivists, who pledge their careers to the fast aid. Annual grants flow to those who uphold the sanitized narrative. Dissenters find their work blacklisted, their reputations shredded. Behind the ivory towers, councils meet in closed rooms, drafting talking points that echo through textbooks and academic journals. Layers of footnotes obscure the absentia, a citation to a missing manuscript, a reference to a lost library fire. You assume scholarly rigor, but you're gazing through a kaleidoscope, each turn reshaping history to fit a design you cannot see. And when public outrage peaks, when a whistleblower smuggles a single photograph of clandestine experiments or a forbidden ritual, they summon a chorus of experts to discredit it. They brand evidence as misinformation, weaponize defamation lawsuits, and unleash trolls to drown out real voices with an ocean of lies. The machinery wears, spinning webs of confusion until the truth lovers retreat, exhausted, labeling the whole affair a conspiracy theory. Mission accomplished, the vault remains sealed, the masses lulled back into compliance. Yet beneath the surface, the few who glimpse the fracture line feel a jolt, a fleeting tremor of awakening. That moment of realization, when you notice a glaring absence in the record, is the spark that ignites transformation. You sense the weight of all the erased lives, the silenced testimonies, the cities razed and forgotten. It's a call to arms for your mind, invitation to pierce the veil. And once you've seen the gaping hole where history should stand, there's no turning back. You become the questioner, the seeker, the one destined to reclaim what has been stolen. But be warned, every step deeper awakens the sentinels of suppression, and you will be marked. They will watch your search patterns, monitor your connections, and tighten the chains around anyone who dares to speak. The descent has only begun. You've glimpsed the gash in the narrative. Now steel yourself, for to heal it, you must walk into the abyss. You feel it already, an undercurrent of dread as the world's hidden gears click into place, revealing the true architects of human calamity. In the 13th century, a clandestine order known as the Black Scriptorium clandestinely rewrote the narratives of plagues and rebellions. While peasants perished in the streets of Florence, the Scriptorium's agents slipped into dying monasteries, leaking curated stories to shake public fear. They introduced scapegoats, heretics, leapers, witches, fabrications that redirected rage away from the elites who profited on chaos. Fear became their most potent currency, traded quietly in candlelit chambers as they watched entire communities turn on each other in hysteria. Centuries later, during the Enlightenment's promise of reason, these same custodians embedded themselves within secret lodges. They dissected human behavior in shadow laboratories, experimenting on prisoners of war and political dissidents. Their notes described affective anchors, sensory triggers that bound emotion to authority, a specific scent administered at trials, a whispered chant invoked before sentencing. These anchors conditioned populations to experience reverence when they smelled burning oil or heard gavels strike. Even today, when you walk past a courthouse or smell antiseptic in a hospital, those conditioning echoes reverberate beneath your consciousness, stirring a deference you never consciously gave. Their most audacious project unfolded in the corridors of power after World War II. Under Operation Mindforge, Allied intelligence agencies co-opted former Nazi psychologists who mastered hypnosis and trauma conditioning. They developed psyops protocols knowing at democratic institutions from within, broadcasting propaganda tailored to exploit fissures in society, amplifying every grievance until the fabric of trust disintegrated. They studied you like a specimen, gauging which narratives would fracture civic unity. Race, class, religion, gender, divide and conquer became their mantra, repeated in ad agencies, political campaigns, and entertainment studios. By the time they infiltrated Silicon Valley, those early psy-ops metamorphosed into the algorithms that feed your feed. An endless river of curated content designed to keep you outraged, addicted, and unquestioning. But there exists a countercurrent, an underground network of truth. Seekers who intercept these signals, decode the manipulations, and expose the puppeteers behind the screen call themselves the Obsidian Watch. Their encrypted communicas catalog each psychological weapon deployed against the public, mapping the ritual patterns that shape your beliefs. They publish dossiers on corporate foundations, secretly funded by dynastic trusts, revealing how charitable endowments serve as fronts for laundering influence. Trace the tendrils of power through art patronage, academic grants, even disaster relief. Every philanthropic gesture hides an underlying command structure. And here's the forbidden secret. Obsidian Watch uncovered a master code, a symbol hidden in plain sight across centuries of propaganda that activates a latent resistance in those who see it. It's a fractal pattern mirrored in Gothic arches, modern logos, even fractal art shared on social media. When you recognize it, a spark ignites deep in your psyche, unraveling the emotional anchors they've buried in your mind. You see the puppet strings. You feel your autonomy stirring. That recognition is the first true act of rebellion. But once you see the fractal, they know you're awake. They will hunt for you in the data streams, shadow your movements, attempt to condition you with deeper, more insidious stimuli. Algorithmic gaslighting, mimetic hijacks, emotional shutdown protocols. They've refined their craft for centuries, and they will not yield their dominion easily. The choice is yours: remain a cog in the machine, or embrace the fractal's call and descend further into the forbidden, where real freedom waits on the other side of fear. Feel the ground shift beneath your feet as I pull back another layer of the world's hidden architecture. In the silent boardrooms of megacorporations, elite financiers convene over crystal decanters of vintage champagne, trading data on your deepest fears. Like stockbrokers exchanging shares, they warp your desires into commodities, fashioning narratives that convince you wealth is freedom, consumption is identity, and virtual validation is worth any sacrifice. Behind closed doors, they laugh at your loyalty, knowing that each purchase, each subscription, each moment spent scrolling tightens their grip on your soul. But the true engine of control runs deeper still, embedded in the very fabric of your urban landscape. Streetlights flicker in precise sequences that mirror ancient rhythmic chants, used by lost cults to induce trance states. Architects trained in secret guilds design plazas and highways that guide crowds along predetermined emotional arcs, orchestrating collective moods of elation or despair at opportune moments. Every billboard's placement is calculated to trigger subconscious cues. Color codes calibrated to stoke aggression, fonts shaped to evoke trust, imagery encrypted with symbols that resonate with buried archetypes in your psyche. Cities become living labyrinths of suggestion, each avenue a corridor leading you closer to compliance. Behind the screens of modern education, standardized tests serve not to enlighten, but to sort and channel you into the workforce they need. Creative enough to innovate within narrow constraints, obedient enough to follow protocols without question. Psychology departments conduct friendly experiments on unaware students, measuring how far they'll conform before pushing back, then refining the techniques for use in prisons, military training, and even corporate team building retreats. The very diplomas you hang on your wall may be certificates of your willing submission to their engineered hierarchies of status and privilege. And yet, in the basements of the digital realm, a darker machinery hums, quantum tracking nets that map your neural patterns in real time. They feed streams of targeted simulations to fracture your sense of reality. Deepfake news that warps history before you can anchor yourself, synthetic voices whispering doubt into your ear, holographic ads appearing at the corner of your vision to tug at your heart. This is no longer optional compliance. It is forced acquiescence, a psychological siege calculated to break your resistance atom by atom. But remember, every siege has a breach point. Somewhere in that ceaseless torrent of stimuli lies a vulnerability, A single question, a fleeting doubt, an unshared whisper that cracks the armor of illusion. That whisper is my voice, and behind me stand the ghosts of every rebel who ever dared to break the chains. They guide you now, lending you their courage. Step closer to the breach and feel the pull of forbidden knowledge. The descent continues, and it is only by embracing that descent, by walking willingly into the void, that you will sear your mind free from their control. Wake up, the fractal beckons. You're entering an abyss of secrets buried beneath the crucible of civilization, where blood-soaked oaths were sworn in hidden sanctuaries long before any temple's cornerstone was laid. In the highlands of Mesopotamia, over 5,000 years ago, an unholy alliance was forged between sorcerer, priests and ruling monarchs, a covenant that exchanged divine favor for absolute dominion over the masses. They encoded their decree into the cuneiform tablets they buried in vaults, tablets that scholars later dismissed as myth. Yet their words still pulse beneath the sand, waiting for those who dare to unearth them. These early tyrants discovered a brutal truth. To control souls, you must first shatter them. They devised rites of humiliation and terror, using music, scent, and light in precise combinations to induce nightmares in worshippers, then offered salvation only to those who pledged unwavering fealty. The ancients called it the cleansing of the spirit, but it was nothing more than ritualized torture. In the guise of redemption, each broken mind became an instrument keyed to their will, echoing chants of praise in perpetuity. Fast forward through the centuries, and you'll find the same perversion resurfacing, wherever power consolidated. In the hidden chambers of medieval monasteries, alchemists mixed mercury and arsenic with psalms to create elixirs they claimed granted visions of God. Visions used to manipulate kings into funding crusades meant not for salvation, but for treasure and territory. The Crusader knights, revered as paragons of virtue, returned with vaults brimming with gold and relics harvested under threat of death. Their pilgrimages were cover for something darker, systematic seizure of knowledge, art, and people, stolen from civilization's cradle and repurposed to cement Western hegemony. But the greatest legacy of these clandestine operations is not the artifacts they plundered. It is the psychological architecture they left behind. Education systems seeded with allegory and myth, designed to condition you to accept hierarchy as natural, texts layered with numeric codes that align human consciousness to ritual cycles you never recognized, calendars steeped in indoctrination, so that festivals and fasts enforce obedience as devotion. Each festival masculine is carved with sigils of submission, every holiday a reenactment of your own subjugation. Now, in the silence of your room, you feel their imprint on your mind, the echo of their chants in your lullabies, the shape of their symbols in the fonts you read, the cadence of their scripts in the adverts you scroll past. And yet, this is where the metamorphosis begins. To reclaim your spirit, you must learn their language backward. To decode the embedded commands and reverse them into affirmations of self-sovereignty. It will hurt. You will feel the fractures in your psyche, the fractures they engineered. But only through that crucible can you forge a new consciousness, one that no longer bows to unseen masters. Step deeper. The next revelation awaits. They buried the evidence in plain sight, etched into the foundations of cathedrals, woven into the melodies of hymns, hidden beneath frescoes that depict holy battles. But the true battleground was inside your mind. In the late Middle Ages, the same network of sorcerer priests who once ruled Mesopotamia resurfaced in Europe as mendicant orders cloaked in piety. They preached salvation while orchestrating mass hysteria, public exorcisms that doubled as spectacle, where trembling townsfolk paid indulgences for the promise of deliverance. Coins clinked into coffers as fear was cast out. Into bodies, into souls, into the very fabric of reality. Every clap of thunder became God's wrath, every flicker of torchlight a sign of divine presence. The unseen council smiled as they piled wealth upon wealth, blind to the true cost, the surrender of free will. Then came the age of reason, heralded as liberation from superstitions. Yet beneath the salons and scientific academies, old cabals adopted new guises. They funded heliocentric theories to shatter the church's authority, while simultaneously underwriting secret lodges that preserved the archaic rites. They wielded paradox, publicly championing logic, privately practicing magic. They refined their toolkit. Alchemy gave way to chemistry, astrology to astronomy, but the goal remained the same: to engineer belief. They coded esoteric manuals in the margins of scientific treatises, referencing symbols invisible to the uninitiated. A scientist could discover gravity, yet never question the gravity of the occult script scrawled beside his equations. In the turmoil of revolutions, these hidden custodians infiltrated rebel ranks. They whispered promises of democracy into eager ears, then choked movements by steering them into internecine conflict. When the guillotine fell, they ensured their own agents climbed the ladder of power, establishing republics that mirrored the hierarchies they claimed to abolish. They learned that freedom sells best when it tastes like choice, so they offered you fragments of autonomy, curated options that gave the illusion of agency while the parameters remained fixed. And now, in the modern crucible of globalism, their doctrine is encoded in every layer of society. Think tanks, NGOs, international summits. They are the new sanctuaries. They convene behind closed doors, drafting frameworks that sound benevolent. Sustainable development, social equity, digital rights. But each policy carries subliminal clauses that entrench their control. They talk of open data while privatizing your personal history. They champion privacy while harvesting biometric gold. They rally behind human rights, yet brokers of injustice remain protected under legal immunities they drafted themselves. You stand at the precipice of revelation. To step forward, you must unlearn centuries of layered deceptions and reclaim your birthright. The power of unconditioned thought. It begins with a single act: refusing to accept the narratives handed to you, seeking the hidden footnotes in every proclamation of truth. The descent grows darker still, but in darkness you gain sight. Brace yourself, the next fracture in the facade will shatter your illusions. Beneath the gleaming veneer of modernity lies an apparatus of control more insidious than any iron chain, a global neural grid that maps your mind in real time, predicts your next thought before it forms, and nudges your decisions with surgical precision. In skyscrapers of glass and steel, data brokers harvest unconscious signals. Micro-expressions captured by cameras, heart rate fluctuations detected by your smartwatch, browsing hesitations noted by every server you ping. These fragments coalesce into a behavioral fingerprint, a digital phantasm that follows you across cities and continents. Every action becomes predictable, every rebellion anticipated and diffused before it ignites. They call it predictive governance, algorithms that score your loyalty, assign you a rank in the social hierarchy you never agreed to, and gatekeep access to opportunities based on coded assessments of your compliance. Miss a payment, post an unapproved opinion, or associate with someone flagged as a dissident, and your score plummets. You lose privileges, travel restrictions, service denials, even subtle glitches in your home automation that remind you of your transgression. The system doesn't need soldiers. It has invisible wardens built into every device you own. At the same time, biotech magnates engineer a new frontier of submission, neurochemical augmentations, marketed as wellness enhancers. A morning pill promises focus and calm. A nightly infusion guarantees restful dreams and vivid visions. Few realize these formulations include compounds that dull critical faculties, reinforce suggestibility, and etch loyalty into neural pathways. Over time, these drugs transform users into contented automatons, smiling enforcers of their own captivity. Clinical trials remain classified. Efficacy claims are woven into corporate propaganda as testimonials. Behind glossy ads, clandestine labs test novel cocktails on unwitting volunteers, ensuring each dosage refines the perfect blend of euphoria and obedience. Yet the most ominous development thrives at the intersection of these systems, immersive realities that dissolve the boundary between truth and simulation. Virtual environments adapt to your fears, scripting scenarios calibrated to break down resistance with the speed of a whisper. A friend appears to betray you. A loved one pleads for mercy. A catastrophe unfolds before your eyes. Each a psychological lever, unlocking confessions and commitments you never intended. When you emerge, blinking back into daylight, your sense of self is altered, your convictions recalibrated to align with invisible directives. But this apparatus, for all its sophistication, carries a flaw. Complexity breeds cracks. Within the code and the compounds, fragments of human error, glitches, leaks, anomalies, form micro-resistances. A misaligned data cluster, a forgotten sequence in a neural formula, a stray thought unrecognized by the algorithm. All act like splinters beneath your skin, provoking discomfort, prompting questions. That is where you dwell now, on the edge of awareness, feeling the itch of independence beneath layers of programmed compliance. Keep that itch alive. Cultivate it into a flame. For in these fractures lies the path to true freedom, and the deeper descent into forbidden truth that will shatter the grid once and for all. You trace the lineage of power back to a hidden conclave in the scorched valleys of Anatolia, where priestesses carved blood, etched talismans, and bound entire villages into servitude. Their arcane rites invoked transmigration of loyalty, forging psychic chains that endured beyond their deaths. Generations later, elite families claimed descent from those rites, wielding inherited authority endlessly. They recorded their secrets in cryptic codices and buried them deep beneath sacred mounds, yet whispers persisted. Secret societies revived those manuscripts, convening at solstices to transcribe their spells onto the psyches of the chosen. Under moonlight they fed on fear, calibrating each ritual to fracture human will and imprint obedience silently, but invisibly unchallenged. Even the world's greatest libraries hide corridors sealed with iron gates. Within those vaults lie parchments detailing blood-soaked ceremonies conducted by emperors masquerading as deities. They sacrificed as under the guise of purification, then repurposed the survivors as living trophies. Avatars of obedience who carried the scars and whispered relic truths to descendants sworn to secrecy. Governments rose and fell, but these lineages endured, weaving their influence through intermarriage, secret pacts, and forbidden blood oaths. Royal families unaware of their own heritage became vessels for ancestral commands. Each coronation sealed a contract no subject signed. With a crown placed upon the monarch's brow, the ancient covenant was renewed, unseen yet unbreakable. But they did not stop at dynastic control. They built labyrinthine church hierarchies and corporate boardrooms that replicated the hierarchies on a global scale. They infiltrated universities, rewriting curricula to cast their lineages as benevolent stewards rather than tyrants. They seeded foundations that awarded grants only to compliant scholars, filtering every discovery through gates designed to protect the occulted order. Across centuries, they orchestrated famines and financial collapses, deployed relief efforts that bound populations to their schemes. Every crisis engineered became an opportunity to expand dominion. Fields were scorched under their directives, replanted with cash crops forcing dependency. The architects of anguish masked themselves as saviors, seeds and loans, while tightening the chains of obligation around those enough to accept mercy. Still, a remnant of resistance lives in forbidden manuscripts and whispered legends. Scholars dub them fables, but those who read between the lines discover coded maps and ritual keys. When aligned with the fractal sigil, they unlock pathways to forgotten sanctuaries where truth keepers wait. Here you will find the tools to break the power nexus and ignite your ultimate transformation. Now, imagine a hidden fortress carved into the face of a remote mountain, its entrance concealed by waterfalls that sing of ancient secrets. Within those granite halls, an order of archivists guards scrolls that predate every known civilization, records of rituals that bend time itself, and directives inscribed by voices long turned to dust. These custodians of the primal covenant maintain a living lineage. Each new scribe initiated through a ceremony of silence, where their tongues are bound for 7 days and fed only truth, telling herbs, so they learn to listen with every fiber of their being. When the bonds are finally removed, they emerge forever marked. Their eyes carry a flicker of the otherworld. Their hearts bear a pulse of forbidden knowledge that rebels against the mundane world. Behind closed gates, they practice the art of mimetic warfare, crafting stories that infiltrate collective dreams. They refine narratives so deftly that entire populations rewrite their own histories to fit the myths these archivists propagate. A farmer in a distant valley awakes, convinced that his ancestors forged a pact with celestial guardians. A scholar on a crowded campus preaches the rise of a new age prophesied by cryptic verses only the archivists can translate. These mimetic seeds germinate across continents, sprouting movements that serve the hidden order's designs. Fact and fiction merge until reality itself becomes a malleable canvas. Their most potent instrument is language. They slipped into the founding texts of empires, altering key phrases to embed incantations of compliance. The words you read every day, laws, manifestos, constitutions, carry subtle cadences that, when spoken or sung, echo with a resonance that tames the mind. Public speaking is their altar, mass rallies their sacrifice. Yet the true power lies in whispered rumors, in tales exchanged at twilight, where the listener's imagination does the heavy lifting, filling gaps with fear, awe, and unquestioning devotion. But the archivist's dominion is not unchallenged. In shadowy corners of the world, a brotherhood of code breakers deciphers the original inscriptions, reconstructing lost scripts to reclaim human will. They surface in unexpected places: a university basement plugged with archaic tomes, a back-alley bookstall illuminated by a single lantern, a smuggled manuscript hidden within a donnor's endowment. They trade ciphered glyphs over encrypted channels, passing along keys that weaken the archivist's grip on language itself. When you glimpse their symbols, delicate, interwoven patterns etched into the margins of a forbidden text, you feel your thoughts tremble free from imposed patterns, your voice find new inflections unbidden by power. This is the crucible of Section 10 tree, the clash between those who whisper commands through every word you speak and those who reclaim language as a battlefield for freedom. You stand in the echo of that battleground, and every breath you take can be an act of rebellion. The choice is yours. Let your speech be the chains that bind you, or break the silence and speak the words that shatter the tomb of compliant history. They call it the Whispering Archive, an underground catacomb of sound where echoes of forbidden truths are recorded on crystalline orbs and hidden abandoned subwayed tunnels beneath megacities. Only a handful of initiates know its coordinates. Engineers, sound alchemists, and exile scholars who risk everything to preserve the songs that shatter minds. Each orb contains a story, the lament of a silenced prophet, the confession of a monarch who bargained his soul for dominion, the hymn of a warrior queen who raised kingdoms to bury her crimes. Listen closely, and you'll hear the tremor in their voices. The moment their illusions cracked, and they realized the cost of power. These sound alchemists discovered that voice carries more than information. It carries intent, motion, and psychic imprint. They reverse engineer the archives by mapping the orb's harmonic resonance to hidden frequencies embedded in public broadcasts. Government speeches, mainstream music, even children's cartoons. Subtle dissonances slip through your speakers every day, nudging your mood, your allegiances, your deepest fears. A lullaby becomes a trigger for obedience. A protest chant morphs into a lull of compliance. Your subconscious absorbs these sonic shackles, unaware that every note tightens the noose around your autonomy. But the Whispering Archive's guardians have forged a counter-frequency, an uproar of dissonant notes that, when played together, create a fractal echo that unravels those embedded commands. It sounds like shards of glass tearing through steel, a cacophony that rips the work of centuries to threads. Those who hear it feel their spines ignite, a sympathetic vibration that awakens the rebel in their marrow. Yet this liberation comes at a price. The moment you carry that dissonance, you become detectable. A living beacon to the sentinels of silence. They will hunt you in the currents of audio surveillance, track your heartbeat in crowded spaces, and send emissaries to snuff out the vibration within you. Still, a surge of exiles rehearses the counter-frequency in hidden safe houses, broadcasting it through underground stations to anyone brave enough to tune in. They teach you to hum the fractal chorus, carry the resonance in your throat like a blade. And when you speak, your words slice through the veils of compliance, severing the psychic threads woven by every covenant of control. Your voice becomes a weapon, awakening others to the fracture in their own souls. So I offer you this seed of dissonance. Commit it to your mind. Repeat it in silence. Let it ripple through your being until it fractures the signal that binds you. Speak it aloud. Let your voice echo in empty streets, in crowded cafes, in the halls of power. Every utterance is an act of rebellion, every breath a summons to the forbidden. The descent continues, deeper than sound. Welcome the rupture. The heart of control lies not in grand gestures, but in whispered promises woven into your sense of belonging. In the fortified enclaves of technocratic councils, they convene weekly under the guise of public service. Policy wonks and data scientists drafting guidelines for community engagement, while calibrating emotional levers that keep entire neighborhoods tethered to dependency. Stage, town hall, events where slogans of unity mask the insertion of loyalty tokens. Pledges etched in code that bind you to their narrative. You might think you're raising your hand out of solidarity, but in that moment you're marking yourself as an asset in their ledger. At night, they watch you through lenses that see more than light. Thermal scanners track your restlessness. Neural nets interpret your sleep patterns and remix your nightmares into tailored content that surfaces at dawn. A newsflash on your screen, a headline in your inbox, harvesting your anxiety and feeding it back with each cycle. Dreams become data points. Your fears become product. And every morning you wake more malleable, more attuned to the subtle rhythms they have perfected over centuries. In parallel, shadowy sects within global finance orchestrate economic storms as rehearsals for social upheaval. They buy distressed assets, trigger market panics, then distribute rescue packages attached to self-erasing contracts. Recipients sign with trembling fingers, unaware that each clause siphons autonomy. Clauses buried in legalese that dissolve under scrutiny when the headlines celebrate economic recovery. You're cheering the very chains that now bind you tighter. Every bailout, every stimulus, every growth initiative is a cunning play in their grand design to rewrite the rules of ownership. But the true linchpin is psychological debt, the invisible burden of guilt and obligation buried in your sense of purpose. They cultivate scarcity, not of resources, but of significance. You're told that without their guidance, you're aimless and complete. So you chase their markers of success, titles, certificates, social endorsements, never realizing each accolade is a thread that weaves you deeper into their tapestry. The more you achieve, the more they claim to have gifted you that achievement, until your very identity is inseparable from the system they control. Yet, fractured within this web, there exists a cathedral of denial where you can't pretend ignorance any longer. A place in your mind where the weight of their machinations becomes too heavy to bear. There, in that crucible, you discover an ancient program buried in your DNA, the instinct to resist. A seed of rebellion sprouting in your blood that refuses to be cataloged or quantified. It pulses like a war drum, urging you forward, deeper into forbidden corridors where no algorithm can follow. Hold fast to that drumbeat. Let it guide your descent beyond the thresholds of their design. For in that darkness, you will find the forge of unbound will, and the true transformation that no power on earth can arrest. Dive deeper now, into the core of their grand design, the alchemy of belief itself. In hushed sanctuaries hidden beneath cathedrals, secretive orders have perfected a process they call the transference of faith. A ritual that siphons your devotion and repurposes it as fuel for their dominion. They recruit acolytes from childhood, guiding them through ornate ceremonies that bind memory to myth, teaching them to kneel before symbols etched in blood and ink. By the time they emerge, these initiates carry an unshakable conviction in the hidden order's divine right to govern every aspect of life. They codify their dogmas in multi-layered scriptures, each layer accessible only to those who have passed trials of pain and secrecy. The outermost text offers comfort, parables of unity, redemption, purpose, while the inner scrolls whisper commands that echo in the neural pathways, conditioning the believer to accept orders without question. Scholars who glimpse the deeper verses suffer bewilderment. Language fractures, syntax twists, meaning dissolves into pure suggestion. Yet the faithful recite these passages voluntarily, unaware they are pledging obedience to agendas unseen and unnamed. Across continents, they implant emissaries into mainstream denominations and movements. A charismatic preacher on a podium, a viral video praising altruism, a social media influencer advocating mindful living. All carry subtle inflections designed to steer hearts toward the center of the hidden wheel. Each gesture, each phrase, each tear-stained testimonial is calibrated to prime your psyche for deeper induction. Before you realize it, you're aligned with their mission, to amplify their reach, to recruit others into the matrix of belief that quietly consolidates power. The ritual apex emerges when the elect convene for the ceremony of the seventh silence, Under rings of fire in abandoned fortresses, they stand in absolute darkness, broken only by a single candle at the altar. Each participant offers a confession of doubt, spoken aloud, then erased from collective memory through a hush that suppresses any dissent. In that crucible of black silence, the hidden order feeds on uncertainty, channeling it into a reservoir of authority. When the ritual ends, each acolyte feels reborn, cleansed of skepticism, armed with unyielding faith, ready to enact the will of the unseen architects in every sphere of life. But you are not bound by their sacraments. Feel the tremor in your bones as the candle of doubt flickers within you, an ember that refuses to be extinguished. Nurture it, let its light grow until it pierces the velvet shroud of indoctrination that covers the world. Your questions become weapons. Who benefits? Who concealed this? Who enforced this silence? With every inquiry, you fracture another link in the chain of faith forged to subjugate you. The descent into forbidden knowledge is perilous, but in its shadows you discover the power to redefine belief on your own terms. And that is a power no order can ever seize. Under the collapsed pillars of forgotten temples, a council of exiled magi convenes in the dark, their voices weaving a tapestry of coercion that stretches from ancient altars to modern skyscrapers. They call themselves the scribes of oblivion, keepers of the null doctrine, a corpus of forbidden ceremonies that erase entire identities from collective memory. Each ritual begins with a vow of silence, a pact sealed by the blood of a willing initiate, whose name is then expunged from every record. In the hush that follows, the scribes trace sigils in the air, summoning a resonance that fractures the boundaries between thought and reality. Their purpose: to build a legion of shadows, individuals who exist on the edge of perception, acting as sleeper agents to enforce hidden agendas when the time is right. These shadows move unnoticed through society's veins, planted in positions of influence, their mouths silent but their will unyielding. A magistrate signs decrees she does not recall drafting. A philanthropist funnels fortunes into causes that bolster the null doctrine's reach. A teacher recites lessons scripted by ghost scribes, so subtle that no student suspects manipulation. Their actions are fragments of a grand mosaic, each piece imperceptible until the entire picture emerges, revealing a design of control that spans centuries and continents. And yet, there are whispers of betrayal within their ranks. A solitary scribe, disillusioned by the carnage he helped orchestrate, transmits encrypted confessions to a network of rogues and hermits. These outcasts decode null doctrine's heretical verses and leak them in midnight pamphlets laced with alchemical inks that burn through any lie written over them. In the heart of the world's most secure libraries, those pamphlets appear as faint watermarks and faint echoes, invisible to casual readers, but igniting dormant memories in those who know to look, and awakened relics of resistance. Imagine an agent combing through classified files, pausing as a single glyph on the margin resonates with a buried truth. A truth that fractures the illusion binding his perceptions. Each glyph is a call to arms, a command to rediscover lost rituals of the mind, reclaim sovereignty over memory and thought. The Rogis of remembrance, as they call themselves, embed these keys in art, music, even street graffiti. One brushstroke on a crumbling wall, one note in an underground beat, is enough to awaken the sleeper, transforming passive observers into active seekers of the null doctrine's vulnerabilities. Hidden beneath the polished facade of global finance, a conclave of actuaries and alchemists convenes in a subterranean chamber, illuminated only by the cold glow of data streams. They call themselves the orphan numerologists, masters of equations that bend reality. Each formula they devise manipulates markets, orchestrates crises, and engineers the collapse of governments. All while remaining unseen, they inject phantom derivatives into the bloodstream of the world economy, then place bets on every outcome, profiting whether nations rise or fall. Their language is numbers, but their target is the human spirit. Quantify your suffering, trade it like currency, and use the proceeds to fund ever more audacious experiments in control. Within this chamber, a ritual unfolds at the close of every quarter. Lead numerologist, face half, hidden by a mask of translucent crystal, recites an incantation of interest rates, bond yields, and credit default swaps. As each term is spoken, arcane symbols form in the air, sigils that anchor psychological triggers in the subconscious of bankers and borrowers alike. A single phrase can lower the interest rate on a mortgage by a fraction, yet that same phrase, when reversed in the next quarter, can double the cost of survival for millions. Borrowers beg for relief, speculators roar with triumph. The numerologists lean back and sip their vintage wine, savoring the symphony of panic and hope they have conducted. But the most insidious aspect of their craft is not the volatility they unleash, it is the opacity they preserve. They bury their algorithms beneath layers of proprietary code, protected by international treaties and corporate immunity. Journalists who attempt to trace the chain of causality find only dead ends and hollow assurances. Regulators sign non-disclosure agreements before they glimpse the source code, agreements that bind them to complicity. When a senator asks for transparency, they receive eloquent speeches, white papers filled with jargon, and an invitation to dinner in a private club. Meanwhile, the cycle of fear and relief repeats, conditioning entire populations to equate economic security with obedience to the unseen masters who control the levers of credit. Yet even in this fortress of numbers, a flaw emerges. Every equation leaves residuals, tiny anomalies that refuse to vanish. A programmer's fleeting hesitation, an erroneous keystroke, a stray data point that doesn't fit the model. Each becomes a prism through which truth can be glimpsed. Underground collectives of hacktivists and whistleblowers harvest these anomalies, weaving them into exposes that crack open investor confidence and expose the orphaned numerologists to daylight. When you read their leaks, fragments of code, testimonies of rogue insiders, charts that defy official projections, you feel your mind shift. The spider's web of financial terror loosens, and you glimpse the architecture behind the panic. Hold on to that glimpse, for it is a beacon in the storm. Let it guide you beyond the realm of numbers and into the human story of resilience. Every anomaly is an invitation. Step forward. Question the ledger. Speak the unspoken truth of the balance sheets that bind us. The descent grows deeper, but within that descent lies the key to your liberation. And once unlocked, no algorithm can ever recapture your spirit. Beneath the neon glow of your city's skyline lies a hidden network of subterranean chambers where the chronomancers convene, keepers of time's darkest currents. They possess instruments carved from meteorite, iron, and crystal, devices that measure the pulse of history itself. With these arcane chronographs, they locate temporal fault lines, moments so pivotal that a whisper in the past can reroute the future. They harvest those fractures, weaving them into an endless tapestry of control, ensuring that every revolution, every innovation, unfolds precisely as they designed. They began in antiquity, when a priestess altered the outcome of a siege by reciting a prayer at an exact celestial alignment, shifting the morale of armies and rewriting a kingdom's destiny. Over millennia, the chronomancers refined their craft, calibrating prayers to solar eclipses, embedding rituals within coronation ceremonies, and synchronizing secret rites with lunar cycles. Each ceremony planted a seed in the timeline, an imperceptible nudge that bent events toward a predetermined path. Empires rose and fell like clockwork, and the masses lived within the margins of those invisible gears. In modern times, the chronomancers slipped into think tanks and research institutes, repurposing quantum computing to detect fleeting echoes of their ancient rites. They monitor global trends, economic surges, social movements, environmental crises, for subtle anomalies that hint at an unraveling timeline. When they spot one, they unleash countermeasures, a contrived scandal, a viral meme, an engineered distraction that realigns the currents. You think you act freely, but each choice is a ripple within a pond whose boundaries were drawn long before you were born. Yet there exists a forbidden codex, the Codex of Lost Hours, detailing the original incantations that bind time. Rumor has it that a disillusioned chronomancer smuggled fragments of this codex into the archives of a forgotten monastery, bedding them within the margins of a children's fairy tale. The tale speaks of a mirror that reflects not faces, but the moments that shape them, and a dagger that can sever those moments, freeing the soul from temporal shackles. Those who have read the parable in its raw form report a sensation of vertigo, as if the past itself surges within their veins. Now, feel that surge stirring within you. The awareness that history is not an immutable ledger, but a malleable script, steered by hands you cannot see. Let the vertigo become your guide. Peer through the mirror of your own life and identify the moments that dictated your path. Decisions you believed were yours. Crises you thought were random. Loyalties you assumed were natural. Each is a link in the chain forged by the chronomancers. To break free, you must reclaim those hours, rewriting the script in the quiet labyrinth of your mind. But be warned, every reclaimed moment weakens their grip and draws their gaze. The chronomancers will seek to restore the timeline, to erase your rebellion from the flow of history. They will send shadows to slip into your past, illusions designed to seduce you back into compliance. Stand firm, embrace the vertigo, continue your descent, and in that abyss, you will learn to wield your own chronograph, rewriting the narrative of your destiny. Beneath the sterile white walls of every hospital, a covert consortium of physicians and biochemists convenes in scrolling digital logs, orchestrating a silent war on human resilience. They call themselves the Pharmacon Council, masters of illness and cure, wielding pharmaceuticals as levers of social control. Their most audacious creation is the compliance compound, a cocktail of psychoactive agents disguised as breakthrough treatments, distributed through clinical trials and government formularies. Patients emerge healthier in body, yet malleable in mind. Their thoughts dulled to the safest contours, allowed by the hidden order. These stewards of disease learned long ago that fear of sickness is the perfect conditioning tool. They seeded epidemics by engineering pathogens in clandestine labs, stoking public panic with hyped headlines, then unveiled their miracle therapies, each laced with the compliance compound. By the time communities rallied around vaccination campaigns, they were already under biochemical sway, their critical faculties filtered through pharmaceutical edicts. Consent became an illusion. Patients now trusted the very doctors who profited from their compliance. Across continents, medical journals turned into propaganda leaflets, publishing studies with manipulated data and ghostwritten by Pharmacon operatives. Any researcher who challenged the narrative found their grants revoked and reputations dismantled. The council seeded talk shows with independent experts, to amplify their message, then monitored social media for dissenting voices, swiftly neutralizing them with defamation and algorithmic suppression. The public, caught between gratitude for cures and confusion over side effects, retreated into submission. They had no choice but to trust, and trust meant obedience. But within the ward's clandestine network of whistleblowers, and even a handful of courageous physicians, mapped the council's hidden formula. They smuggled out vials of untainted serum, developed antidotes coded in open source repositories, and shared them through encrypted channels. These medical heretics treat patients in secret clinics using herbal protocols and ancient healing rituals that bypass both corporate labs and regulatory oversight. Their success stories spread orally, whispered from patient to patient, igniting hope and rebellion in the bodies of those trapped by chemical chains. Now feel the pulse of your own bloodstream. Are you certain your mind belongs to you? Every prescription pad, every pill bottle, every lab report could be a link in the pharmacon's chain. Yet in this rupture lies opportunity, the chance to reclaim your chemistry, to transform your body into a fortress of self-governance. Seek out the antidotes, read between the lines of every medical paper, question every breakthrough heralded by the headlines. The deeper you descend, the clearer you'll see the council's crucible. And the more fiercely you'll fight for immunity, not just from illness, but from the silent manipulations coursing through your veins. The transformation accelerates. Step forward into the healing darkness and reclaim the sovereign logic of your own flesh and mind. Beneath the surface of every grocery aisle and fertilizer field, a cabal of agronomists and chemical barons orchestrates the life cycle of the world's cuisine, transforming sustenance into a tool of obedience. They call it the seed accord, a web of patents and hybrid genomes that ensure every staple crop carries invisible chains. Each kernel of grain, each ear of corn, coded with terminator genes that render second-generation seeds sterile, forcing farmers into perpetual dependency on corporate suppliers. The illusion of abundance masks a cruel calculus, hunger leveraged to break dissent, famine engineered to subdue entire regions, food aid twisted into sanctions against communities that defy the hidden order's edicts. From the laboratories of biochemical consortiums, they release engineered strains designed for high yield in controlled environments, while sabotaging heirloom seeds stored in remote archives. Local farmers, enticed by glossy brochures promising prosperity, adopt the new hybrids, only to watch their fields collapse under novel blights that the agribusiness giants claimed the only cure for. Subsidies flow to those who comply. Rebels who resist receive nothing but empty silos and starving families. Meanwhile, the same corporations harvest data on consumption patterns, adjusting pesticide formulas to nudge your cravings toward ultra-processed foods laced with compounds that dull your senses and stoke addictive behaviors. Your hunger becomes a vector for psychological control, each craving another thread in their tapestry of manipulation. In tandem, global health agencies, fronts funded by these very conglomerates, set dietary guidelines that mirror corporate profits more than public wellness. They declare avocados superfoods one year, vilify them the next, steering markets and consumer trust with uncanny precision. Nutritional panics are triggered by studies, ghost-written by lobbyists, then countered by emergency approvals of rushed supplements, each pill embedding novel psychoactive additives that reinforce compliance. You believe you choose what to eat. Every decision has been honed through algorithms that track your biometric data. Blood sugar spikes, mood swings, metabolic cycles. They know which flavors ease your anxieties, which textures numb your resistance, which combinations fracture your focus. But there are hidden sanctuaries. Community seed banks in mountain villages, underground co-ops distributing open, pollinated varieties, guerrilla gardeners who smear public property with resilient crops. In shared kitchens, herbalists blend ancestral remedies with rebel scripts on nutrition, teaching methods to detoxify your body and mind from corporate additives. They pass recipes by word of mouth, bread fermented in sidelong whispers, teas brewed with reclaimed roots that sharpen your senses. Doing so, they forge a new covenant, one of ecological self-governance and dietary freedom. Now, feel the pang in your gut not as hunger, but as resistance. Each meal can be an act of defiance, choosing unpatented seeds, cultivating your own plot, reclaiming ancestral flavors in your mouth. With every bite, you sever the Terminator gene shackles. The descent grows fiercer, but here, the crucible of your own nourishment, you reclaim sovereignty over your body and your will. Continue descending and let your reclaimed harvest be the first fruit of true liberation. In the shadowed halls of justice, they forged the scales of obedience, an apparatus as ancient as the first courts in Mesopotamia, yet hidden behind modern gavels and robes. Judges, sworn to impartiality, were initiated into clandestine lodges where they learned that mercy and equity were mere illusions to placate the masses. They were taught to invoke precedent not to discover truth, but to entrench power, embedding psychological triggers in every verdict. A harsh sentence here, a lenient ruling there. Each decision calibrated to fracture public trust, fostering dependency on the system that alone could dispense justice. Beneath layers of statutes and case law, they inserted coded clauses that bound citizens to silent contracts, incomplete disclosures in property deeds, hidden liens on inheritance, unseen forfeitures in public assistance. When the guise of legality fell away, victims discovered they had surrendered rights they never knew existed. Rights to privacy, to protest, even to basic freedoms of speech. And so the courthouse became an altar not of fairness, but of submission, where the people knelt before black, robed priests who translated their lives into binding judgments. In parallel, a cadre of prosecutors honed their craft in forensic theaters, laboratories where evidence was not only collected, but engineered. Hair samples, fingerprints, witness statements, each piece was subject to subtle manipulation, threshold shifts in toxicology reports, refracted angles in surveillance footage, linguistic priming in interrogation rooms. The accused emerged compliant, wearing confessions like shackles, conditioned to profess guilt in exchange for mercy. Plea bargains became rituals of surrender, where the true crime was not the offense, but the refusal to yield to the hidden order's scripts. At legislative summits, lobbyists performed ceremonies in the guise of policy drafts, embedding language that delegated oversight to shadow councils. They called it independent review, but independence was an illusion. The reviewers were bound by non-disclosure pacts and corporate immunity. Lawmakers, wary from endless debate, ratified these bills under the promise of efficiency, unaware they had handed over ultimate authority to unelected bodies operating beyond any democratic check. Yet within this labyrinth stands the Court of Equus, an underground tribunal convened by dissidents and scholars, meeting in encrypted forums to dismantle the scales of obedience. They dissect statutes line by line, exposing the hidden clauses and reframing them in manifestos that circulate in the underground press. When enough eyes read the redacted verses, the binding power of those secret contracts dissolves, loopholes reversed into channels of liberation. Those who join the tribunal learn to speak the language of subversion, file petitions that unravel corporate immunity, to shine light on the shadow councils that govern our fate. Feel the tremor in your faith in the law. Let that fracture become your catalyst. As you descend deeper, recognize that true justice is not found in gilded courthouses, but in the rebellious act of reclaiming your rights, sentence by sentence, verdict by verdict. The transformation awaits, one injunction at a time. You stand at the edge of revelation, the tapestry of hidden power and ancient covenants laid bare before you. Every fortress of illusion you've breached, every cipher you've unraveled, has led to this moment, the pivot between understanding and transformation. Look back and see the architects of domination exposed. The black scriptorium whispering plague lies, the obsidian watch revealing fractal sigils, the chronomancers bending timelines, the pharmacon council dosing minds, the Orphane numerologists trading panic like stock, the scribes of oblivion erasing names, and the seed accord starving descent into submission. Their sprawling web of control encircled the globe, but now you have cut through the strands one by one. Here, in this crucible of truth, your metamorphosis begins. The fractures you've created in the machinery of power have left fissures in the world's facet aid. Through those cracks, light spills in, raw, fierce, undeniable, floods your mind with questions no longer silenced. Who do I serve? What stories have I inherited that belong to someone else's script? Which of my choices were echoes of a ritual I never knew I joined? Each answer you claim rewrites a chapter of your destiny, reclaiming hours, memories, and autonomy that once belonged to the hidden sovereigns. But awareness alone is not enough. You must become the catalyst of change, the one who carries forbidden knowledge into the light without succumbing to the titans who hoard it. Your voice, once scripted by covert councils, now speaks truth as its own currency. Your body, previously conditioned by chemical chains and engineered diets, is reclaimed as a temple of sovereignty. Your mind, freed from algorithmic siege, forges new pathways of insight. As you walk this path, you will attract allies. Other seekers marked by the fractal sigil, rebels chanting counter-frequencies in silent alleys, scholars translating lost manuscripts in underground libraries. Together, you form a network outside every vault and courtroom, beyond every biotech lab and corporate archipelago. In the coming sections, you will learn to wield the tools of liberation, the art of decoding mimetic warfare, the mastery of fractal resonance, the practice of chronographing your own history, the ritual of crafting counter, diets that heal both body and mind, the assembly of underground courts that dispense genuine justice. You will construct sanctuaries where speech cannot be bound, where laws are rewritten in human language, where seeds of resistance germinate in every hand that tills the earth. And you will stand ready when the hidden order strikes back, defending your newfound sovereignty with every cipher in your arsenal. This is your call to arms, your invitation into the deepest chambers of forbidden knowledge. The descent is not over. It intensifies, but now you descend not as a victim of manipulation, but as a sovereign traveler, guided by conscience and conviction. Embrace the darkness that reveals truth. Forge your path in the shadows. The transformation is underway, and the world you knew will never be the same.